Okay, so we are going to begin learning some watercolor techniques. So watercolor is a little different type of paint. Watercolors are created by mixing pigment, color, with water and gum. So you need water in order to wake up the paint. If you don't wake up the paint, nothing's going to happen. It'll just stay there dry. So that's why it's called watercolor. You absolutely need water. Watercolor paint is non-toxic, so it is safe for us. It's washable, and it can move easily around your paper. So that's a good thing and a bad thing. You have to know what you're doing before you begin, because once it moves into an area, it's kind of hard to get it back away. The paints are very see-through. You want to use a soft brush, and you don't really need white paint. I never really use white paint. I always just let the white of the paper shine through if I want white, so I don't paint anything if I want white. You don't want to mix the colors too much, otherwise they get super muddy. And you're probably going to need a sponge or a paper towel. You want to use this on thick paper. Okay? So here are some examples of what we are going to learn with watercolor. So we're going to start with wet on dry. This is the most basic watercolor technique. So watercolor comes to us in a tray. This is very messy, as you can tell, but it still works. Now I like to use my watercolor paints until they are completely empty. So even this looks like it's running out, there's still some here on the edges that I can use. Now I'm touching this, nothing is happening because the paint is not wet. Once it's wet, it's going to get all gooey like this. Okay, so right now I can touch it without anything happening. So I need my paint and I need some brushes. Now with watercolor, you want a soft haired brush, so you'll have to figure out which one is soft. So I'm going to use this one. Salt. Salt is a neat effect. It leaves this sort of like speckly marks all over your paper. So for salt, you want to make sure you're getting it pretty wet. So I'm actually going to get the paper wet a little bit here. And I'm putting paint down. And while it is wet, you want to sprinkle salt. And this is just like salt you would eat, but you don't want to eat it in here because this is actually pretty old salt, so it's not fresh. You want to sprinkle it while it's wet. If you put it on while it's dry, nothing will happen. What you should start to see is you should start to see the water sort of being sucked in by the salt, and it's going to leave this mark. You might not see it right away. You might see it right away. It depends. But we leave the salt on there and wait for the paint to dry. Once it's dry, then we can scrape it off, and then we can see our neat little effect. Okay, the next effect that we can do is plastic wrap. So here's plastic wrap. I'm just going to take a little piece off, paint this, just like I did with the salt. You want to get it pretty wet. Just want to you want to kind of crumple it up and lay this plastic wrap on top of your paint. You leave it there until the paint dries. So salt and plastic wrap, we have to just kind of wait. Okay, so here, we're going to go here to splatter. Splatter is exactly what you think it is. You're going to get a wet brush, get some wet paint, and there's a few ways you can do it. You can just do this, tap your brush. You can do it like this. You can add multiple colors. So the key is you just need it to be pretty wet, but notice my paper isn't wet. And this is kind of just scary because the splatter can go anywhere. It is harder to control, but that is how you would splatter. So here we have lines. This is just very simple. You get a wet brush, not too wet, and here you can create basic lines so you can paint out things, you can draw things. Here we have dripping and blowing. So here again you're going to need some wet paint. It needs to be wet enough that it can move around. And I have a straw here, and I can blow in a direction I want the paint to go. Just like that. Okay? And you could do the same thing by dripping. So you would just put paint and let gravity run its course. Just like that. A lot of artists do this to give a neat effect, very loose. Okay? So we'll wait for this to dry, we'll peel them off, and then we'll look at them all complete. Okay, so here we are all complete. So I've taken the salt off. It hasn't given us that great of an effect, but here, this is a little bit better of an example. This is what salt will do. And the same thing kind of happened with the plastic wrap. I think it's because I'm just using thin paper here, but plastic wrap should leave some marks. It left a little bit there for you to see, but it'll leave really nice, cool textures. Okay? So here are our watercolor techniques.